On a dawn when the moon seemed smaller than it should, a physicist stood before a simple experiment. Beams of particles that sometimes behaved like waves, sometimes like solid bodies. The most disturbing detail was not the result itself, but the presence of whoever was watching. It was enough for someone to record the phenomenon for the outcome to change. It was no longer just about protons and electrons. It was about the human gaze transforming the course of matter. This is the core of the so-called observer effect, a point where science and mystery intertwine. Quantum physics, with its mathematical precision, revealed something that seems closer to a mystical metaphor. Reality is not fixed until it is perceived. Before observation, multiple possibilities coexist like clouds of probability. Only afterwards, before the gaze, does a choice occur. Reality solidifies. But what does this mean for you beyond formulas and laboratories? Could it be that your attention also shapes everyday life? Could each thought be a kind of inner gaze, defining not only what you see, but what comes to exist around you? The impact of this concept is profound. It is as if each gesture of consciousness were an invisible blade cutting through the fabric of the undetermined. The world does not present itself ready-made. It responds, it reorganizes, it dances to the rhythm of whoever observes. Perhaps reality is not a static stage, but a living skin that reacts to the touch of perception. And the question that echoes is inevitable. If the universe responds to the observer, who in fact is the observer within you? The question left in the air, who is the observer within you, is not merely philosophical. It is a point of convergence between physics and consciousness, where the concrete and the ethereal seem to share the same stage. To understand the observer effect, one must remember that the quantum world does not follow the familiar rules of everyday life. At the microscopic level, particles do not occupy fixed positions. They exist as probabilities, as specters of possibilities awaiting definition. And this definition does not occur on its own. It happens the moment a measurement takes place, the moment a gaze falls upon the field of uncertainty. For decades, physicists wondered whether it was only the experimental apparatus that forced the result, or whether something deeper was at play, the very consciousness of the observer. It is as if reality was suspended in a liquid state, and only the act of looking were capable of crystallizing its forms. This idea, at once disturbing and fascinating, suggests that the world is not something finished and complete. It is in constant negotiation with perception. Some experiments reinforce this sense of strangeness. In the famous double-slit experiment, particles fired at a barrier revealed a wave-like pattern until someone decided to observe more closely. In that instant, as if aware of the gaze investigating them, the particles changed their behavior, adopting defined trajectories. Reality seemed to alter its narrative merely to respond to the presence of someone there to witness it. What to do with this enigma? For scientists, it raises technical discussions about the wave function, about the relationship between probability and collapse. For human experience, however, it opens an even more provocative gap. Could our everyday attention also interfere with the fabric of life? If, in the quantum world, the simple act of looking reorganizes particles, could it be that our thoughts, perceptions, and inner states are in some way modulating the events around us? This hypothesis should not be taken as superstition, but as an invitation to reconsider the role of consciousness. The observer effect forces us to abandon the old view that reality is an immovable stone before us. It suggests that we are involved in an invisible dialogue with the universe, in which each choice of focus alters, however subtly, the course of things. Think about how an experience changes when witnessed. A silent room acquires another vibration the moment someone enters and observes. A trivial gesture gains intensity simply because it was seen. At the quantum scale, this principle is taken to the extreme. Observation not only intensifies what already exists, but decides what will be. What was once a school of possibilities becomes a single line of reality. The crucial point is to understand that the observer is not only the one who opens their eyes to the external world. There is also an inner observer, silent, who follows each thought, each emotion, each micro-choice. This inner witness may be the equivalent in our psychic life of that gaze which collapses the wave function. And if this is the case, Every thought you sustain is a form of creative observation. This perception transforms the relationship we have with our own mind. It is not only about controlling positive or negative thoughts, but about recognizing that each focus of attention is like a beam of light projected over the vast field of probabilities. Where attention rests, something solidifies. Where there is no gaze, the field remains open. The observer effect in this sense is not just a curiosity of physics. It is a reminder that life does not present itself as an immutable wall, but as a responsive flow. What you call reality may be in part a dance between the invisible that observes you and the visible you choose to contemplate. That is why, before moving forward, it is worth recognizing the seriousness of the invitation that quantum physics makes to us. It is not only describing particles that change behavior under the human gaze, it is showing us in an almost poetic way that consciousness is not passive, that to observe is to create, and that the boundary between science and spirituality may not be a wall, but a space where both touch like two tides meeting in the same ocean. If even science recognizes that reality is only decided in the gaze, it is necessary to take this realization beyond the laboratory and experience it in the body of existence. The quantum field, invisible to the common senses, is not as distant from us as it seems. It pulses like a reserve of potentials, like fertile soil where multiple paths await the gesture that chooses them. By observing, we are not merely describing, we are fertilizing the space of possibilities with the energy of attention. We can imagine this process as a landscape shrouded in mist. Before you, entire hills remain covered, without defined outlines. Only when you turn your eyes to a point does the outline of a tree begin to emerge, a stone is revealed, a path opens. Reality, in this sense, is not a fully illuminated stage. It is more like a valley of mists that responds to the focus of whoever passes through it. What remains out of sight continues latent, in suspension, awaiting another gaze to give it form. This metaphor should not be read as fantasy, but as an attempt to translate into images something that physics itself points to. The universe, before observation, behaves as a probabilistic field. After observation, it consolidates as an event. In our lives, this same dynamic repeats on a larger scale. What receives no attention remains diffuse, while what is seen gains density. There are simple practices that allow us to experience this directly. Close your eyes for a few moments and recall a space you know well, perhaps your living room or a path you frequently walk. Notice how, when you think of that place, it does not appear complete all at once. First, a detail arises: the color of a wall, the distant sound of the street, the touch of the floor under your feet. Only after choosing where to direct the inner gaze do other elements begin to emerge. Your mind does not reveal everything at once. It consolidates gradually, as if each focus of attention were a lamp lit within a larger environment. This exercise, though simple, reveals something essential. Inner reality is also organized according to the gaze. If in imagination this manifests clearly, in the material field it may occur more subtly. Each thought sustained longer is a lamp lit over an aspect of life. Each emotion sustained is an energy that gives contour to what was once only possibility. We can take this experience deeper. In spiritual traditions, there is the practice of contemplating a single point, a flame, a stone, a symbol. What happens in this type of contemplation is revealing. The more one looks, the more the object expands in meanings until it seems to overflow beyond itself. The same occurs at the quantum level. Attention not only records, but amplifies. The observed object does not remain indifferent. It is altered by the intensity of the gaze that sustains it. Perhaps that is why so many ancient cultures considered the gaze a creative force. It was not mere superstition to say that a gaze could bless or curse. In symbolic terms, and now scientific ones, to observe is to transfer energy, to collapse possibilities, to fix a path among the many that could exist. This understanding brings a silent responsibility, to realize that each choice of attention is a creative act. What you decide to see in yourself and in the world is not merely a reflection of an already finished reality, but a decision that affects what becomes real. Neglecting this force is equivalent to letting the field of probabilities organize itself without your conscious participation. Recognizing this power, on the other hand, is to enter another level of relationship with the universe, that of co-creator. If reality is this mist that responds to the gaze, the question that arises is, what landscapes have you revealed? Which hills remain covered because your attention does not seek them? And what could form if you sustained a deeper gaze upon possibilities not yet manifested? In physics, the observer decides the particle's trajectory. In life, the inner observer decides which futures become paths. And with each breath, each instant in which you turn inward or outward, something solidifies from your perception. If up to now, the idea seems to have been built in a linear way, attention shaping reality, consciousness influencing the course of events, it's time to take a bolder step. For the observer effect is not just a key to opening desired paths, it is also an uncomfortable mirror. If observing can create, it can also limit. If focus illuminates, it can also blind. What you call reality may be, in part, only the prison built by your own gaze. Until here, you believed that observing meant expanding possibilities. But what if the same force that opens also closes? Think. By fixing your eyes on an idea of who you are, by mentally repeating the same images about your life, you may be solidifying not only dreams, but also patterns of pain. The collapse of the wave function does not choose only what is beautiful, it also stabilizes what you insist on seeing as inevitable. This is the point that changes everything. It is not enough to recognize that the observer creates. It is necessary to question what kind of observer you have been. For each gaze is like an energetic signature in the field of existence. The future that repeats may not be destiny, but the result of attention imprisoned in old narratives. This is where physics meets the spiritual paradox, because while consciousness is creative, it can also be a jailer. The key is to realize that observing is not just recording, it is choosing. Choosing where to rest your gaze, which emotion to sustain, which story to feed. And if reality seems not to change, perhaps it is because the observer within you keeps looking at the same point in the mist, consolidating the same forms. Think of a river. Its waters carry countless fragments, branches, leaves, reflections of light. What you see depends on the point where you fix your eyes. Focusing on a leaf is to lose sight of the school of fish passing just below. Fixating on the movement of the surface is to forget the strength of the currents at the bottom. The river is vast, but the observer decides the narrative that will become real. So it is in life. What you choose as focus repeats until it seems unique. But what if the true quantum leap is not just to create desired realities, but to learn to change the observer? Not merely swapping superficial thoughts, but altering the quality of attention, allowing it to expand, to cease being a prisoner of a single story, to become liquid, mobile, capable of revealing scenes never seen before. This is the turn. To understand that the observer effect is not only about transforming the external world, but about transforming the lens through which the world is seen. If consciousness is the key, the secret lies in sculpting that consciousness, making it wider, freer, quieter. Here a direct invitation is born. Observe your own way of observing. Pay attention to the repetitions of thought, to the images you always reinforce. Recognize that each of them is like a slit in the wall of the quantum laboratory, deciding where the particle will run. Modern physics has given us the metaphor. It is up to us to apply it in daily life. And at this point, I want to propose a concrete action. If this content resonated with you, do not keep your gaze only within yourself. Expand it to this collective space. Like this video and write in the comments the sentence, "I choose to change my gaze." This small declaration is not just interaction. It is also an act of consciousness, a way to inscribe your decision in the open field. By writing, you are not only responding, you are training the observer to choose new realities. The question left by the previous part still echoes, what kind of observer have you been? To understand this answer in depth, logical reasoning is not enough. A narrative is needed that allows you to feel the truth hidden in this idea. And every ancient civilization knew how to translate cosmic mysteries into archetypal stories, because myth speaks directly to the innermost part of consciousness. Among Eastern traditions, there is an old tale about an apprentice who wished to see the gods. He climbed the mountain believing he would find luminous forms, figures of gold and flaming eyes, but at the top, he found nothing but a grey sky and cutting wind. Desperate, he cried out into the void, "Where are the gods? I came to see them." Silence answered. For days he kept waiting, fixing his attention on the space before him. No vision appeared, until, exhausted, he began to notice not the distant sky, but his own breath, the cold on his skin, the strength of his muscles, the cadence of his heart. And it was in that moment that something was revealed. There were no gods waiting outside. It was the very act of observing that summoned the sacred. What he sought was not absent. It was veiled by his narrow gaze. This myth does not speak only of hidden gods, but of our tendency to expect answers in distant settings. The apprentice believed that it would be enough to look outward intensely for the mystery to reveal itself. However, his vision was conditioned. He expected a specific form, an idealized appearance. And that fixation was what prevented the revelation. Only when he changed the focus of his gaze, from grand expectation to the present detail, did the invisible begin to come alive. Quantum physics describes something similar. It is not only the instruments that interfere with the result, but the very configuration of the observer. If he expects only one form, reality accommodates itself to that limit. If he opens to the unexpected, new patterns can emerge. The myth of the apprentice and quantum theory speak of the same key. The gaze creates but also filters. Another symbolic example can be found in the archetype of the hunter. He moves through the forest in search of a specific animal. His senses become so trained to find that target that he ignores countless signs around him. Other species, alternative paths, even signs of danger. The forest is vast, but the hunter sees only what his expectation allows. This is exactly the filter we apply when observing life. Often, we believe that only one outcome is possible, and with that, we fail to see all the others that were already within reach. These stories reveal the same lesson. The observer is not neutral. He carries desires, fears, beliefs, memories. All of this becomes a lens, and the lens shapes the reality that manifests. The one who sees only failure attracts circumstances that reinforce that gaze. The one who insists on contemplating beauty expands the conditions for it to flourish. The quantum wave function may indeed contain infinite possibilities, but it is the quality of the observer that decides which of them will become a stage. Here lies the emotional dimension of the observer effect. It is not just a scientific concept, but vital force. The story of the apprentice shows that a change of focus can reveal the divine. The hunter archetype shows that the limitation of attention can impoverish the world, and both narratives reinforce the same warning. To care for the way one looks is to care for the reality one builds. You may ask, how to apply this without falling into illusions? The answer may be less about controlling and more about tuning the gaze as one tunes a musical instrument, listening to which inner notes are being played when you contemplate something, noticing whether your attention is narrow and rigid or whether it opens like a deep listening, capable of receiving the unexpected. The true power of the observer lies not only in creating what he desires, but in being available to what he does not yet know to desire. The apprentice who found the divine in the breath did not know he was seeking that. The hunter who saw only his target did not know how many possibilities he ignored. In both cases, the limit or expansion of the gaze determined the quality of the reality revealed. And perhaps this is the most moving point of the observer effect. Understanding that each of us carries the capacity to transform our own destiny, not through force or imposition, but through the delicacy of a conscious gaze. The lesson left by the apprentice and the hunter makes room for a practical question: how to transform the act of observing into conscious experience. Theory inspires, metaphor sensitizes, but it is in direct exercise that consciousness moves from understanding to lived experience. If observing creates, it is necessary to learn to observe in another way. Gently close your eyes now. Breathe deeply, but without haste, like someone returning to the body its natural cadence. As the air enters, Notice the sensation of the chest expanding. As it leaves, notice the weight of the body yielding to the place where you are seated. Do not try to change anything, just witness. You are practicing the first level of the conscious observer, not the one who interferes, not the one who judges, but the one who simply records. Now, turn to a thought that has recently circulated in your mind. Perhaps something simple, a worry about the next day, a recurring memory, an expectation. Bring this image forward, as if it were a small flickering flame, and instead of losing yourself in it, observe the very act of observing it. Who is it that notices this thought? Who is it that witnesses its form arise and disappear? This question needs no intellectual answer. It is enough to feel that there is something in you that sees but is not the content seen. Gradually notice that the thought begins to dissolve, not because you expelled it, but because the energy that sustained it was withdrawn. This is the power of the observer, to sustain or withdraw focus. That which receives prolonged attention solidifies. That which is only recognized and let go returns to the field of possibilities. This practice shows, on an intimate scale, the same phenomenon described by physicists. Now take this exercise to a more creative dimension. Choose something you wish to experience, not a fantasy detached from reality, but a possibility that pulses in your life. It may be a project, an encounter, an inner state of calm. When bringing this image to consciousness, notice how it also oscillates like a wave, still undefined, still made of fluid contours. Sustain your inner gaze upon it, but not with the tension of one who demands, and rather with the curiosity of one who lights a torch in the midst of fog. Notice how, as you maintain this attention, details begin to appear. The scene composes itself. Emotions linked to this image arise. It is as if the mist of probability were giving way to a more concrete outline. This is the training of collapsing the wave in the inner field. The more you practice, the easier it becomes to transfer this kind of gaze to everyday life. But there is an essential detail. The conscious observer does not cling to control. The difference between creating and imprisoning lies in the quality of attention. When the gaze is rigid, it suffocates possibilities. When the gaze is open and curious, it invites reality to reveal itself in unexpected ways. The mountain apprentice only found the sacred when he stopped demanding that the gods appear in specific forms. This is the secret of the exercise, sustaining focus without reducing the universe to a single answer. Practice in the body as well. Open your eyes slowly and choose a simple object in front of you. It could be a cup, a leaf, a stone. Observe it as if it were the first time you see it. Do not try to name or describe it. Just notice its texture, its contours, the way the light touches it. The longer you sustain this gaze, the more the object reveals a presence that previously went unnoticed. This external training reflects the same quantum principle. Observation deepens the real. The result of these exercises is neither immediate nor spectacular. It is silent and transformative. Gradually, you begin to perceive that your attention is a field of creative energy, that thoughts can be dissolved simply because they receive no nourishment, that possibilities can bloom simply because they were seen with clarity. What physics describes in equations, you experience in living flesh. To observe is to choose is to create. And perhaps the greatest learning is this: the observer is not merely a mental function, but a presence that vibrates throughout the entire body. Each breath can become an act of quantum collapse. Each conscious gaze can summon new realities. The field of probabilities never closes. It only awaits your decision on where to light the torch of perception. Upon finishing the exercise, something remains in the air. The feeling that observing will never again be merely looking. Each thought witnessed, each object seen with renewed attention, each breath accompanied in silence, all of this reveals a subtle truth. You are not a prisoner of what you see. You are the point of decision that gives shape to what appears. The observer effect ceases to be only a scientific concept and becomes intimate experience. Consciousness as creative force, the gaze as a gesture that sculpts the real. Perhaps the whole of life is this expanded quantum field, a sea of possibilities that reorganizes with each choice of focus. The future does not arrive ready-made. It pulses in suspension, awaiting the gaze that will turn it into ground. If attention is the blade that cuts the mist, the way you choose to use it defines not only your perception, but also the paths that truly open. But do not conclude too quickly. Breathe and notice. The real is still approaching. Not every answer comes as a word. Some arrive as a vibration in the body, as an intuition that grows slowly. Perhaps this is precisely the final invitation of the observer effect. Not to believe that the mystery has been deciphered, but to keep looking until the invisible reveals itself in new forms. If you have come this far, write in the comments, "I am the conscious observer." I want to know that you walked with me to the end of this journey. And if this content made sense to you, subscribe to the channel and continue with me in this field of discoveries, where science and spirit meet to remind us that the real is always greater than we think.